let's continue the conversation because a lot of folks are curious about how the Save America Act could ultimately impact voters if it's passed.
That's right. Joining us now to discuss is the Fair Election Center's president and CEO, Rebekah Caruthers. Rebekah, thank you so much for joining us. I guess if you could just start by addressing your reaction to President Trump really pressuring Congress to act on the Save America Act.
Well, the reason why the president has to exert so much pressure is because it's not popular and it's not needed. I do want to clarify something. It's beyond a simple voter ID bill. This is actually requiring documentary proof of citizenship. And for your viewers, documentary proof of citizenship are documents like your birth certificate. It could be a passport. Unfortunately, millions of Americans don't have readily access to a passport. They don't have a passport, or they don't have access to birth certificates and other documentary proof of citizenship documents of that like. The reason why this is so important, I'll give the example of my grandfather. My grandfather was born Henry Caruthers with 2 R's. When he moved from Oklahoma and he moved up to my home state of Nebraska, when he registered with the civil service, the government, they changed his last name. They dropped one of the R's. And his last name was C-A-R instead of C-A-R-R. And if the SAVE Act was to pass, if he was required to use his birth certificate and then trying to access the ballot box, register to vote, he would be denied because they would say, oh, there is not an exact match in the spelling of your name, even though the federal government knew for years who he was because he paid taxes. He registered with civil service with them. And so my grandfather's story is a story of many people across this country. Not everyone's documentary proof of citizenship was accurate. So one of the issues is if you take the SAVE Act and if you make it a new law in July or August, there isn't enough time for American people to get what they need in order to successfully vote. And that's one of the issues. Another key provision in the SAVE Act, it would criminalize or impose civil penalties if local election administrators, local election officials make a mistake as they're registering people to vote. The role of the federal government is to enforce voting laws. The role of the federal government is not to restrict who is eligible to vote. It is up to the states constitutionally to determine eligibility. And up until this point, states have done a remarkably good job. Even the president's own Heritage Foundation has done a series of studies. They've looked at the data and they've showed in the last few decades that there hasn't been an outsized or even a significant number of those who aren't eligible, those who are undocumented people in this country attempting to vote. So the question is, why is the president so hell-bent on wreaking havoc into our election system, especially so close to a major national election?
So when it comes to the Save America Act, to your point about it being so close to November, even Republicans are saying the time has run out. We can't do this and have these changes implemented before November. But the president did get maybe a bit of a win for now when the Postmaster General said, yes, the law or the rule on the table right now, the policy, the guideline is if states don't turn over their voter rolls, we are not going to deliver mail-in ballots. Do you think that ultimately ends up in court, and are you concerned that that specific piece, which isn't attached to the Save America Act, could actually be implemented before November?
So what the Postmaster General is proposing is not a win. It is unconstitutional to say that states have to give up privacy and data and give up information on its residents in order for the Postal Service to actually do its job. The Postal Service is not here to call balls and strikes. The purpose of the Postal Service is to accurately and timely deliver parcel throughout the system in the United States, not make determination on who's eligible to vote or who's not eligible to vote. That is not the purview of the United States Postal Service. And it's unfortunate that the president is putting pressure on various agencies, semi-agencies, and various departments across the country to make it harder for millions of Americans to vote.
Rebekah, the White House has said that the U.S. actually lags behind other nations when it comes to election integrity. It points to India and Brazil, which use biometric data as part of the voter ID process. What would your response to that be?
Well, prove it. You have the bully pulpit of the White House, so prove that there is an issue with the American election system. Now, of course, there are ways and should be ways to modernize and continue to improve how we carry out elections, but the president could start that by advocating for passage of the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. The president could advocate to make sure as many Americans who are eligible to vote and who want to vote are able to vote instead of coming up with all these wild conspiracy theories. On this, the president's hands are not clean. The president keeps saying, oh, well, he should have the right to nullify the vote, including some of his sycophant supporters are saying that the president or those who don't like election results should be able to overturn the results of the people. The president simply does not have clean hands. The president has been making all sorts of wild assertions about the integrity of our election system, and the president has not been able to prove any of these things. Even members of his own party, even Republican secretaries of state across the country have said, no, the elections that have been carried out are free and fair, they are accurate, and they should stand. Yet the president keeps pushing outsized pressure to cause chaos and confusion into our election system. He is trying to use misinformation and disinformation to suppress the vote this fall by making millions of Americans question the integrity of our election system.
We just have a few seconds left. You mentioned just then that there are ways to make our elections better. What are those ways in your view?
Sure, make sure that states have the resources that they need in order to have year-round employees who are able to do the work. That's one of the things that the president could do. Make sure that states like North Carolina aren't introducing bills that say, hey, by the way, local election administrators shouldn't be promoting the right to vote. We need a president who supports democracy. We need a president who's looking for resources and funding to make sure as many Americans who want to vote are able to vote, instead of looking for a president who is trying to make it harder for Americans to vote.
All right, we'll have to leave it there. Rebekah Caruthers with the Fair Election Center. Thank you so much for your time and your insight this morning. Rebekah, have a great weekend.